here in the ILO. It's I, mean, first, it's been an amazing journey to be with the ILO for so long, and the ILO is the oldest specialized agency of the UN. It's over 100 years old, and it's focusing on what we call the world of work, which is basically the workplace, but then it's much larger than that. Over the 100 years, we've gone through a lot of changes, but we've kept true to our ideals. And I'll mention a couple ideals. One is social justice. Our mandate is to promote social justice. It's even in the first sentence of the ILO Constitution. It says, whereas universal and lasting peace can be established only if it is based upon social justice. So there's something about peace being more than just the absence of war, and justice is key to that. And social justice is what we all make together. It says it's socials in the title. Governments, members of workers and employers organizations are key leaders in society, and that's what the ILO brings together. We need everyone's participation in this world of work to create and to maintain and protect social justice. And we think that particular point of view, that perspective in the ILO, strengthens the UN overall. And so that's basically my answer to your question. Oh, I would like to. I just had one more thing about decent work. We also have a mandate to promote decent work, and basically that sums up our aspirations as workers. We want to work in conditions of decency and security and safety. I'll just borrow a quote from one of our former director generals, the head of the ILO office, from about 20 years ago, Juan Somavia. When someone asked him, what is decent work? He said, well, he went all around the world and talked to many people in different cultures and countries and different languages, and they all said they wanted decent work. And this is the quote. They meant work that will provide for the health and education of the family, which will ensure their basic security in old age and adversity, which respects their human rights at work. Decent work is not defined in any fixed standard or monetary level. It varies from country to country, but everybody everywhere has a sense of what decent work means in their own lives and in relation to their own society. So the ILO taps into that and promotes decent work.
Thanks a lot, Eric. So you've heard, colleagues, that the ILO was established in 1919, exactly the year after the First World War was over. No? And the logic of creating the ILO was that promoting social justice should help prevent wars. We can't say that that has worked out exactly like that, but definitely the ILO's pursuit of social justice is very important. It's really what is our guiding light. Eric, there are two other, I would say, interesting features of the ILO which make us quite different from other specialized agencies like the World Health Organization or others. One is our governance structure, what we call our tripartite structure. You would explain what that means. But also, second, the capacity we have as ILO to also adopt legally binding treaties. So perhaps you can elaborate a bit more on these two important elements.
Great. Yeah, thanks very much, Stefan. If when you work inside the ILO, you hear people use the term tripartism a lot. What does that mean? Basically, the main leaders of the organization, our constituents, are representatives of workers' organizations, employers' organizations, and governments. And just like you said, Stefan, after World War I, people said we need a table with at least 3 chairs. We need those workers, governments, and employers to be there, and that's going to help promote social justice. And that really kind of the idea of social dialogue, justice, and work is built in there. That makes the way we work rather unique, with this strong focus on talking to each other and resolving conflicts in that way. And standard setting, I mean, we're a standard setting organization, and for example, we produce conventions that have the same weight as international treaties. Now, you've probably heard of some of the overall UN conventions, such as the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The ILO also produces its specialized conventions, and the latest convention was Convention 190 on violence and harassment in the world of work. And you said that I'd worked over 20 years in the ILO. One of the greatest experiences was working on that, and the workers, employers, and governments led that whole process. We in the ILO support them, and they came up with a fantastic convention. And that convention itself actually is a convention that refers to the importance of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So the conventions are a result of a lot of hard work, a lot of dialogue by people all around the world.
Thank you, Eric. Let me just speak a bit more about the convention part, because once the convention, and I take the example of Convention 190, and the number 190 means that in the 103 or 4 years that of existence of the ILO, 190 conventions have been ratified, have been adopted, which is quite remarkable in terms of numbers. The Once a convention is ratified, basically, once a convention is adopted in our big meeting that we have every year, then it's for countries to ratify that convention. That's the same logic as with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I think it's like 27 or 28 countries that have already ratified Convention 190, which is not bad in the rather short time. And then once the two main obligations for a country once it ratifies a convention, similar to the CRPD, is you need to change your legislation and policies to align it with what the international convention says. And then you also have a reporting process. You need then to report every 3 or 4 years, depending on what the text of the convention says, to the ILO to show what you have done to gradually align your laws and policies to the convention. So it's a very exciting process. Let me also, Eric, just share with you, because we haven't seen each other since yesterday, a meeting that we had this week with a delegation from Ukraine. And it's very interesting because it's really this reflection of the tripartite nature of the ILO. It was a meeting of a Ukrainian delegation. Imagine the current context of war that they are living. It's a delegation headed by a deputy minister of employment. That's usually our counterpart in the ILO are the ministries of labor or employment. But also 3 representatives from trade unions and 3 representatives from employer federation. It was really an excellent example of tripartism and social dialogue in action in the specific context of the Ukraine. Eric, can you perhaps share with us a bit the size of the ILO? How large are we in terms of numbers? How many, are we more here in Geneva, in our headquarters here in Switzerland? How much, or are we more in what we call our field offices? I think that information might also be useful for our listeners.
Yeah, we've got around 3,000 some staff altogether, and that's mixed. Like you said, we're calling in from our headquarters here in Geneva, Switzerland, which is an amazing place because it's right near the Red Cross. It's right near the Palais, which is the center for the UN overall, and many different agencies are across the street from the WHO. So it's a great place to be. We got actually a bit more staff in the field. When I say the field, it's outside of headquarters. I had the pleasure to work over my career in Latin America, Asia and the Pacific, and also here. So there's a lot of exciting different things you can do around the world. We have about 40 of what we call field offices throughout Africa, Arab states, the Americas, Europe, and Asia and the Pacific. And I think being at headquarters or in the field offers many different opportunities. I think one of the best things, we talk about tripartism a lot, but when the best part of our job, I think, is when workers representatives or employer representatives or government officials come to our offices and say, they want to make legislation or policies, and they have certain technical questions, and we can help them get to where they want to get because we serve them. So I think whether if you join the ILO, whether in the field or headquarters, it's a really, really exciting experience.
Thanks a lot, Eric. And I think it's very important also for the listeners, because when you will look at our job vacancies, job opportunities in the ILO, and our colleague from the Human Resource Department will give a few tips later on, you will see that some are Geneva-based, which is where we have roughly 40% of our overall staff, but then many of the job vacancies are in specific countries, so I think that's just very relevant for you to know. We are probably, compared to some other UN entities, we are not so large. I mean, other entities like UNICEF or UNDP are much larger in size, but it's, I think, still a relevant size we have. Eric, we can't today explain to our listeners all the work that we do in the disability team. but I think it's particularly relevant, the work that you have been leading over the last 3 years, which is implementing the United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy in the context of the ILO. And I think that journey, so to say, of making us more inclusive is something that our participants will probably be very interested to hear directly from you as the lead person in that process.
Oh, thank you very much for that question, Stefan. Yeah, I think we play, roles at different levels. We certainly have our own culture, our history, and the way we work with tripartism, and we are embedded in that overall UN system. And I think what I call UNDIS, what we call UNDIS, or the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy, is really something that brings us all together in the UN. And what that means is a few years ago, the Secretary General of the UN, the head of the UN, he said that we needed to have this overall strategy to increase inclusion of persons with disabilities, increase accessibility. He said we needed, and this is a quote, action to raise the standards of the UN's performance on disability inclusion across the board, and action to bring about the unified and transformative change we need. So it's about a policy, about a strategy, but it's about action. So it's not just words. Well, I think what UNDIS means is that all of us in the UN system are really working hard to improve accessibility and inclusion in many areas, from employment to persons with disabilities. That's why this talk today is so important, to procurement, to how we train our staff, to how we develop projects and programs. What the ILO did is it took that overarching strategy from the UN, and we made our own policy and strategy. And when I say we, I mean people all across the organization. We have people in HR, we have our senior managers have done such a fantastic job. We have people working who actually in the facilities who make our buildings accessible, lots and lots of people. So we developed a policy and strategy that fit our needs in our particular context. To give you a flavor of this, when our Director General at the time, when he launched this new policy and strategy, he provided a number of insights into the ILO's vision on disability inclusion. I just want to bring two quotes here because I really love what he wrote. He said, and this refers back to that overarching idea of decent work. He wrote, implementing the ILO policy and strategy on disability inclusion will help the ILO become an employer of choice for persons with disabilities, ensuring fully accessible and accommodating workplaces and a culture that truly values and embraces diversity and inclusion. I love that quote because that's our mission, that's our mandate. And our Director General concluded by saying, greater inclusion of persons with disabilities will make our organization stronger and better. And he went beyond that. The last sentence of his introduction to the policy and strategy was, this inclusion is a moral imperative for each and every one of us. So I think really the best thing about this job is we get to work with colleagues throughout the entire ILO, throughout the entire UN system to promote disability inclusion. It's really dynamic. There's a lot of positive energy. And I think in a very short while, you'll see that in action with the colleagues who follow our talk. Thank you very much, Stefan.
Thank you, Eric. Definitely becoming an employer of choice is an objective for the ILO, for the wider UN. It's fair to say that we are not yet there, but I think there's been significant progress over the last years, and I think the participation in today's virtual job fair is just one of the examples of this implementation in action of our commitment that is reflected in our new policy and strategy. Eric, thanks a lot. I will now like to pass over the floor to our colleagues Cornelia, Arya, and Güler. So colleagues, over to you, and see you perhaps later in our booth. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. We're so pleased to see you here, and thank you very much, Stefan, for the first part, and Eric for the first part of this live stream. As Stefan has already explained, in the second part of the live stream, we are now meeting, you will be meeting two of our colleagues working in the disability team, Güler Koca and Arya Chung, and they will share with you some of their experiences working for the ILO. And before we start, I would like to ask Arya and Güler to introduce themselves, please.
Sure. Hi, my name is Aria. I am a junior project officer here at the ILO, and as Cornelia said, I'm part of the disability team.
Hi, I'm Guller. I'm also part of the disability team. My name is Turkish. I'm from Turkey and from France, and I'm supporting the team to implement the UN disability inclusion strategy here in the ILO with my great colleague Eric Carlson that you heard just now.
And my name is Cornelia Griss, and I work in the Department of Human Resources in the area of recruitment, and that's why I'm here today. Because we're quite interested in having more applications from people with disabilities, and we see this as a wonderful opportunity to meet so many of you. And I see that the chat is very active. This is great. For the individual questions, we will have time for you in the chat. So we won't be able to address all of your individual questions here during the live stream, but afterwards we'll be meeting you in the chat, and we hope that we can address all your individual questions. But let me now ask a couple of questions to my colleagues and to share their experiences. And I would like to start with Aria, who in actual fact, and I want to benefit from her experience because she was an intern in the internship program in the ILO. And I wanted to ask her, how did you hear about the ILO and what made you apply to the ILO internship program when you first started with the ILO?
Thank you. So through a series of various connections, someone had messaged me on LinkedIn, the ILO posting about the internships, which actually my now supervisor had posted about, advertising them. So LinkedIn is a great place to and I see a lot of colleagues at the ILO also posting various positions. So that's a good place to look. But I applied because I have a background in sociology and human rights. And towards the end of my master's last year, and for personal reasons, I started getting really interested in labor rights. So this was like the perfect place. And an internship I thought was a good way to get my foot in the door because I hadn't had a ton of work, professional experience related to the field yet. So I thought an internship would be a good way to try to get my foot in the door.
That's great. And I want to mention that we are opening our next call for applications for interns on the 4th of May. So if any of you may be interested, we would like to also invite you to look at our website. As of the 4th of May, we're going to be advertising new opportunities. And I wonder if you could tell us maybe a little bit more about your experience with the ILO as an intern and how it was to arrive here in Geneva.
Yeah, so the internship program honestly is so great. I know the ILO really prides itself in having a very strong and positive internship program. I believe it's ranked the top internship program in the UN agencies. So I think firstly, orientation was really positive. You're not just thrown in and expected to work. Interns here start every 1st and 15th of the month. So you're always with the cohort, which is really nice. So you're starting with new people, and then the current interns also help welcome you and everything like that. But I think something that makes the intern program here really special is that there's an intern board. And so this has different positions like a social officer, a finance officer, co-president, various positions like that. And they meet once weekly. So I remember when we did it, we met every Monday and we would all get in a circle and we would discuss various issues we want to address regarding the internship program, specifically really focusing on ways to improve it for future interns. So I know in the past, for example, one of the things they've worked on is increasing the stipend. And then another thing, years ago, a group of interns actually were able to get us every day at 2 p.m. after the cafeteria closes. We were able to go downstairs to the cafeteria and grab food from the salad bar for free for 10 minutes, which is great because obviously as an intern, any bit helps, and getting a free meal every day like that is really nice. So we were able to work on different issues and really put ourselves in and help improve the internship program for future interns. And as for living in Geneva, so I came from London, so because I was studying there. but Geneva is beautiful. There's a beautiful lake, there's mountains. It's a pretty, for me, small city just compared to London, what I was used to. But it's quite easy to get around with the public transportation because there's trams and buses, and it's quite walkable as well. So I think that's something that's kind of unique to it. Yeah.
That sounds great. And I know that you're no longer an intern and you are working for the ILO in a staff function now, but maybe if there are some people who would like to apply for the internship program, I wonder if you may have some tips for them how they should shape their application for the internship program.
Yeah, so I mean, I think definitely think about your background and how it can apply to the ILO. The ILO in general, like, yes, it does work on like worker and labor rights, but there are so many positions within the internship program. Like, for example, there's like communications department, so if you have a background in like media or communications, you can still find opportunities. So I think that's something that's really good about it, is there's a vast like of options for people. And I would say a big thing is just, if you're interested at all, I would genuinely really encourage you to apply. I think it's been such a positive experience. And I think one thing that may like deter people from applying for internships is that they think, or you need to like, it's kind of more for freshly graduates, but a lot of us are actually like in our mid to late 20s and like been out of school for a bit. So and some interns are even, older than us. So I think it's a really great opportunity to get your foot in the door and learn more about the ILO. And especially if you're interested in how the UN works in general, I think you learn a lot, because I didn't honestly know much about the ILO or the UN and how it works before coming, and I mean, I'm still learning, but you definitely learn a lot more about how it works because it's such a unique work experience for sure.
Thank you for sharing your experience. And just to clarify, maybe I just want to clarify, you can obviously apply to the internship program when you've graduated, but it should be within the year that you have finished your studies. But there are many of the interns who may have done something different between their bachelor's degree and their master's degree. And then they come after their master's degree or even after their PhDs to join us. So that's just to clarify, you cannot come at any time in your career, but when you are a graduate and you have recently graduated, you are still eligible to join our internship program. Thank you so much, Aria. And is there anything you would like to add?
No, just I mean, I couldn't like express enough like the positive experience I've had with not only my like colleagues but other interns, but just in general being at the ILO. I felt very included. So just for reference, you can't see, but I'm missing my forearm. So I think I felt very included and very welcomed in this space, and I think that's something that's probably very positive. It's very positive to hear. But I definitely recommend, if you're interested, and yeah, definitely reach out and stay for the chat later if you have any questions specifically about the internship program. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it.
Thank you so much, Aria. And now I would like to ask Gula some questions. Gula, you also joined the ILO not too long ago, and I would like you to tell us, if you would like to tell us maybe a little bit about your career path before you joined the ILO and how it led you to join us here.
Thank you so much, Cornelia, for the great question. So yeah, I had the opportunity to join the ILO a bit approximately 1 year ago. I'm a lawyer initially, so I studied law and then international and European law, and then I have gone for another master in conflict resolution. So I have a bit like an atypical profile. And sometimes we can actually imagine that to work for the ILO, we need to be very specialized in social protection, or which actually I think a lot of participating now might be actually, because I know some of you, but I thought it was mandatory to be specialized, although I don't know, in labor law or collective bargaining, or these kind of very important topics. But me as a lawyer, I was working more with refugees. So I was supporting asylum seekers to become refugees. But actually, and I forgot to mention that about my disability, that I'm a person who has visual impairment. I'm going to talk about it a bit later on when I will hopefully talk about the adaptations I'm getting to work here. But yeah, I really, after my studies, I really struggled to find a job. And as many persons with disabilities, I had to do, I would say, more unpaid work than others. Should it be by volunteering? Should it be by interning in places that were that interns where interns are not necessarily paid? But I've always learned a lot, and I have always taken all these opportunities to learn. And I was so motivated to do everything I could to show, first of all, that the disability was not a disability. It was not what would prevent me from doing things. Although we know that disability depends a lot on the environment and not that much on us. But I still wanted to really show that I could do so much things, and I started traveling also a lot with studying abroad programs and also interning abroad and these kind of things. And finally, I started working as a consultant for different organizations, international organizations, UNHCR, and then I worked for the International Disability Alliance. I was the youth coordinator for the International Disability Alliance, so I'm sure a lot of participants know me from there, but not all of you, of course. But when I worked with youth with disabilities, the access to the labor market came up so much. Like, it was such an issue. It was the first issue that was mentioned by youth with disabilities when we were asking them what's the most important topic that we should address. And yeah, so when my contract with the International Disability Alliance ended, I heard about this opportunity. The ILO was looking for somebody to support designing and a training on consultation with organizations of persons with disabilities. And that's how I started working with, and more particularly with Eric Carlson, who is a disability specialist here. And we designed the course on consultation of organizations of persons with disabilities. And now we are working on many different other topics. So yeah, it's just it's a journey, and I think it's just about taking the opportunities, trying to open up some doors, because they don't open alone for us. And it's also a lot about who you meet, I think. How your career evolves is really depending on who we meet. And so it's all about going with the flow and making the best of each experience, I think.
Thank you very much, Güler. I have a second question for you. Can you tell us what a normal workday looks like for you, and if you have some adjustments to be able to perform your work? Because you mentioned you have a visual impairment, and maybe people may be interested to hear about that.
Yeah, I can understand that's quite a very important question probably for participants, and wondering about what a day look like and what you do, and about adjustments, because that's so important for us as persons with disabilities when we work. So first of all, a normal day for me, it depends. It's not always the same, but it can be about reviewing documents and providing technical guidance for like disability documents, like produced by our team, but also produced by other teams. Like lately, we have been reviewing some guidelines on procurement, on accessibility of the ILO buildings, but that's not done by us. It was done by another team, and we are reviewing documents and providing technical guidance. So I do a lot of that. I also worked a lot on the creation of the guidance on consultation with organizations of persons with disabilities. So that included writing, creating, and putting it into a document that later on will be transformed to an online training. It's also about coordinating. Here in the ILO, we have a Disability Champions Network. It's a network of 80 ILO colleagues based in here in Geneva in the HQ, but also all over the world. So we are organizing trainings and meetings with them, where Eric and I either provide some a bit of like capacity building trainings on some topics, or we invite other colleagues to explain about their work. Like lately, we had a colleague in Lebanon that is working on a project with refugees in Lebanon and about resilience and creating some work opportunities for them. And she was explaining to everybody how she started including persons with disabilities from Lebanon in that project. So hopefully other colleagues get motivated and learn how to do that in their own contexts. So that's really about preparing the meetings, the speeches, and then organizing the meetings and doing them, and also taking the best practices from colleagues, compiling them, and these kind of things. And so it's a mix between reviewing documents, having meetings, and organizing some kind of activities for the network. And many other things, but I forgot. But maybe, but no, not I forgot. This time, and just want to say that it's not always the same day. Basically, that's just what I meant. And about the adjustments, first of all I have a screen reader. So because I'm visually impaired, so the ILO provides a screen reader that's installed in my laptop, and so that's really the main thing I got. I also got the first day when I came here, I felt that was amazing. Eric Carlson, who is my direct supervisor, he provided me like a guided tour in the ILO. So that was great. I felt like I was in a museum because there were so many things and design things that I didn't know that they were there. So Eric was describing everything, and just I don't know, it was just very amazing. And then although I still got lost for the first 2 weeks, I was one day I found myself in the office of the department chief without really knowing. I was just going to the elevator. So I mean, these things happen because it's a very huge building, but at least the team is really understanding and supportive. So in the first weeks, it has been some learning about a lot of learning, and just having the understanding of the team, I think, is part of the adaptations I can get. Like, it's just that I didn't feel pressured, or it's okay, I could take my time to do things. So that's also great. And it's also about the environment. I feel like I'm really free to manage my days that the way that I feel is better, and no one is asking me like I don't know, like how long did it take you to do that, or just do things the way it's better for me, without even needing to justify. Like, for example, sometimes I need to review documents, and it's not easy for me to changes, and then instead of also doing strike changes, or instead of adding comments, I provide my comments, or by talking to the person, or by responding by email to that person. Like, just about also very minor adaptations that I make, and it just goes with the flow, because people are not like always asking. Like, it's not like I don't feel I'm doing things differently. It's just that we are all doing things the way that's better for us anyway. So I take it like this. And but I can confirm that I really got like a screen reader that's really helpful, so I can work with this computer as others. And about orientation also, I got that support. So and I just, the last information, I have a guide dog, so that's also totally okay. I mean, we can navigate in the ILO buildings with assistance animals, and also now people are a bit more used to see an animal in the ILO.
He's much appreciated. As much, it's nice to see the dog in the building, because it does show that we have an environment that allows for this for inclusion. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Güla, for sharing your experience. I'm a bit mindful of time because we said that we were going to open the chat soon. So I wonder if I should add something at the end, or should I maybe add a couple of comments on general recruitment?
I think a lot of participants
Yes,
are
please.
curious, so maybe I don't know. I would say
Yes,
that
we got we got a lot of questions in the chat on more practical. So I think Cornelia, a few tips on where people can find information will be very useful. Thank you.
Yes, so we will be addressing all the individual questions that you have on your specific situation in the chat. And I see that Stefan has already answered to some of your questions, but we will now have time also to address them in the chat. But I want to just give you a couple of general tips. Applying to the UN system in general and to the ILO specifically can be a frustrating experience. And that is not singular to the ILO. This is actually something that has to do with the UN receiving many, many applications worldwide. And we do not have the capacity to always individually provide feedback why a particular application didn't work out. So our applicants, and this is not singular to a specific group of applicants, often complain that they feel it's like a black box applying to the UN. So my top tip is do not let this discourage you to apply again. Should you not hear back fast, or should you not get a response that tells you why you were not considered in this particular situation, I can tell you this is most likely not due to your to you being a person with disability, but it may be the same experience for everybody else applying to the UN. So my top tip is do not let this discourage you, but keep looking for jobs. And when you're looking for jobs, make sure that you are very carefully reading what is the profile we are looking for. We are having difficulty considering people who do not meet, for example, the educational requirements or the language requirements or the experience requirements. Because we need to be objective and we need to be open to people from all over the world, and we need to try to be fair on everybody. So we do actually screen very carefully on what we are asking for and in the most objective way possible. Therefore, try to read carefully what is written in the experience, education, and language requirements, and ensure that if you have them, those requirements, that you make it very clear in your application that you have them. Because we can only look at things that are submitted to us. We cannot second guess, and we cannot try and figure out what the person may have as a background. We really only go from what we are receiving. I know that for some of you, this may be more difficult than for the average applicant, and we are very happy to provide reasonable accommodation. So my top tip to you would also be, as soon as possible, when you see an interesting job opening, try to be in touch with us through email. You can also call if that's easier, or any other means, and alert us that you are interested in a job opportunity, and then see how much we can assist in you getting a good application to us. Because we are interested, obviously, in getting more applications from people with disabilities, and we will try and make sure that your application will be considered, of course, if you are fulfilling the minimum requirements that I mentioned at the beginning. So that, I think, for us would be the top tips. Don't be shy, come forward and let us know how we can help. And we are very happy to do what we can to accommodate. And I mentioned it already, the internship roster opens very soon, so we are welcoming applications for that. And we also have, of course, a normal application website which shows all our jobs. There is a way to signing up to automatic alerts. And I think that may be an easy way to stay in touch and to find out what kind of job offers we have without having to continuously check our page. So we would be sending you automatic messages telling you what kind of jobs are available whenever they become available. And that's maybe the easier way of finding out what we have on offer. So these would be my top tips. And I thank you very much for your attention. I see that the chat is very active, which makes me happy to see how many of you are engaged. And we are now moving over to the chat to be able to answer your individual questions. See you soon.